Welcome to PastCast. Join us as we dive into the events and lives that shaped our world. Each episode reveals fascinating facts and stories from history. Ready for some seriously strange stories?
Oh, I'm always ready for those.
Well, today, we're diving into American cryptids.
You know, those creatures that make you wonder, is there something really out there?
Or is it all just a good yarn?
Right.
We've got articles, first-hand accounts, even some scientific analysis to look at.
Sounds like a good mix.
So get ready to explore the Mothman legend, meet some other cryptids from across the U.S., and maybe even, question what we think we know about the world.
I love it when a deep dive makes you rethink things.
Me too.
What I think is so intriguing about cryptids is that they blur those lines between folklore and, well, the possibility of something genuinely new.
Yeah, it's not just like unicorns and dragons, right?
Right.
It's about people saying, I saw this thing,
Hmm.
and they describe it, and these stories become part of a place.
It becomes part of their identity.
So let's start with a legend that's practically become the symbol of one place, the Mothman,
Ah, yes.
of Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
It all starts back in 1966.
Okay, so picture this.
All right.
It's November.
Dark night.
Two young couples are out driving near an abandoned World War II munitions plant.
Ooh, spooky already.
Right. This place was known as the TNT area.
Setting the scene.
And suddenly, they see something, well, unusual.
Definitely not your average deer in the headlights.
They reported a creature about 7 feet tall,
Whoa, that's big.
glowing red eyes,
Made it creepier.
and huge wings.
Not exactly something you'd expect to see hanging around, right?
Nope, not your typical moth.
Not at all.
And this wasn't just a one-time thing.
Oh!
Over the next year, there were Mothman sightings all over Point Pleasant.
It's interesting how these stories, whether there's proof or not, become a shared experience for a community.
It really is. The Mothman basically went from a strange sighting to a local legend.
I mean, there are books, movies, even a festival, right?
Yeah, it's like the town adopted the Mothman,
Even though it's a little, unsettling.
to say the least.
Yeah.
But then the story gets even more intense.
Oh.
Just over a year after those first sightings,
Okay.
December 15th, 1967,
Uh-huh.
the Silver Bridge collapses.
The one across the Ohio River.
Right, during rush hour. 46 people died.
Awful.
A tragedy that really shook everyone.
And this happened so soon after those Mothman sightings.
People started asking, did the Mothman have something to do with it? Was it some kind of warning?
That's the debate that's been going on for decades. Did the Mothman cause this, or is it what we call epiphenia?
Apophenia.
It's that thing we humans do. We see connections between things that aren't actually connected, especially after something bad happens.
We try to make sense of it.
Exactly. It happens all the time, not just with cryptids, but with conspiracy theories and stuff.
We're always looking for patterns, even when there aren't any.
It's fascinating.
It is. Like, we're wired to find explanations.
Yeah,
Even if they're supernatural.
right. The Mothman story is such a powerful example of how, you get a cryptid sighting, a real tragedy, and it creates this perfect storm of fear and fascination.
And everyone wants an explanation.
Exactly. It makes people question everything, what they believe, how they see things, whether there's something bigger going on that we just don't get.
I know the Mothman is just one of many cryptids in the U.S. What other creatures are out there?
Oh, there are so many. America has its own parade of cryptids, each one with its own unique story.
Like?
Well, you've got Bigfoot,
Oh yeah, Bigfoot, the classic.
the hairy hominid wandering around the forests of the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
Then there's the Jersey Devil. A winged demon, they say, haunts the Pine Barrens of New Jersey.
It sounds delightful.
Oh, and they often seem to emerge from very specific landscapes.
Forests, swamps, mountains, places that already feel mysterious.
Exactly. Like those landscapes are just breeding grounds for both real and imagined creatures.
Yeah.
It's where our fears and that fascination with the wild kind of take shape.
Become real.
Right. And let's not forget about the chupacabra.
Oh yeah, the chupacabra.
Creature with spines down its back, they say it drains the blood of livestock, mostly in the Southwest and parts of Latin America.
Okay, that one's definitely creepy.
It is. And it kind of reflects those worries people have about, the safety of their animals.
Especially in rural communities.
Yeah, it's like these cryptids tap into real anxieties. They give a form to those fears that people have in their everyday lives.
It's like a way to talk about those anxieties without having to face them head on.
You got it. And that's part of their power. They let us peek into that edge of what we understand, confront the things that scare us, and maybe even, find some common ground with others, whether we believe or not.
So we've got these creatures tied to specific places, right? Like they embody what's mysterious or scary about those areas.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, is there something about those locations themselves?
Oh, like something we don't scientifically understand yet.
Yeah, that makes these legends pop up.
Some researchers have thought about that, for centuries.
Yeah.
They've got theories about certain geological formations, or maybe magnetic fields, or even just weird sounds in a place.
That can mess with people.
It could contribute to, strange experiences.
Make people imagine things.
Maybe. Or make them more suggestible, like if someone says they saw something, others might start seeing it too.
Ah, the power of suggestion.
Exactly. Whether it's true or not, who knows? But it's definitely interesting.
Makes you think. But what about the scientists? Are they out there looking for Bigfoot, trying to catch the chupacabra?
Not really.
You're not going to find Mothman in a biology textbook, right?
Probably not. The scientific community, they're pretty skeptical about cryptids.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, you need some pretty solid evidence to prove something like that exists.
So they're not running around with nets trying to catch these things.
Not exactly, but they're not ignoring them completely either.
Really?
There's a whole field called cryptozoology. It's trying to use science to investigate these creatures.
So, taking it seriously.
They're trying to understand them, not just dismiss them as fantasy.
What do they do?
They'll look at eyewitness accounts, try to find patterns in the descriptions or the places people see these things.
Oh, interesting.
And if there's any supposed evidence, like footprints or hair samples, they'll examine that too. See if there's a normal explanation.
So it's like a detective investigation, trying to figure out if there's a real creature behind the legend or if it's something else entirely.
Exactly. And sometimes, those investigations can lead to some pretty cool discoveries.
Even if it's not a monster.
Even then. Take the okapi, for example.
Okapi, what's that?
It was considered a cryptid for years. People in the African rainforest described it as this weird zebra-giraffe mix.
Well, a zebra-giraffe. That's wild.
But then in 1901, they found out it was a real animal, a distinct type of giraffe relative.
Wow. So sometimes those rumors of something strange turn out to be a new animal.
Makes you wonder how many other undiscovered creatures are out there, right?
Definitely.
And even if most cryptids are just misidentified animals, hoaxes, or things people imagined, the exploration itself is valuable because it forces us to question what we think we know, to look at the world differently, to be okay with not knowing everything.
That's a good point. It's like a reminder that science still has some gaps. There's always more to learn.
Exactly. That's what makes cryptozoology so cool. It's a reminder that there are still mysteries out there and that trying to solve them can take you to some pretty amazing places.
So let's dive into some of those wilder explanations.
You mean the ones that aren't just misidentified animals?
Yeah, the more supernatural ones, or extraterrestrial, or even government conspiracies.
Those are always fun. What's interesting is how those explanations, they often reflect what people are worried about at the time.
Or what they're interested in.
Right, like with the Mothman, some people think it was a supernatural warning, like a sign that the bridge was going to collapse.
Tapping into that fear of the unknown.
And trying to make sense of something terrible. Then there are the alien theories.
You mean the Mothman was an alien?
Maybe a scout, or even some kind of experiment from another planet.
It plays on our fascination with aliens, right?
Totally. Like, what if we're not alone in the universe, and then there are always the government conspiracies?
Oh, yeah, those never go away.
Some people think the Mothman was a military experiment gone wrong, like something with genetics or radiation.
Secret government stuff. Classic.
It shows that deep distrust of authority, Like they're hiding something from us.
It's amazing how, even if these theories sound crazy, they tell us something about ourselves, about our anxieties and how we see the world.
Exactly. Cryptids are like blank slates that we can project our fears and hopes onto. A way to talk about the stuff that makes us uncomfortable.
The stuff we don't want to face head on.
Right.
So they're more than just creatures. They're symbols, reflections of what we're thinking and feeling.
You got it. And that's why this topic is so endlessly fascinating. It's not just about whether these things exist. It's about what they say about us. Our beliefs, our fears, and that never-ending fascination with the unknown.
Let's get back to the science of cryptids for a minute. How do researchers actually try to figure out what's real and what's not?
One way is to compare what people describe to animals we already know about.
So like with the Mothman.
Exactly. They look at the size, the wings, the glowing eyes, and they see if any known animals fit that description.
Ruling out possibilities.
Yeah. And sometimes that leads them to think, okay, maybe this was just a normal animal, but people saw it differently.
Misidentified it.
Right. For example, with the Mothman, some have said it could have been a sandhill crane.
A crane.
They're big birds, and they can look pretty scary when they're flying, especially in the dark.
Especially if you're already freaked out.
Exactly. And they have reddish markings around their eyes, so maybe that's where the glowing red eyes come from.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's easy to imagine how darkness, fear, or just being excited about seeing something weird could make you see things differently.
Absolutely. And scientists also consider how our minds work, how we process information and form beliefs.
Or psychology.
Yeah. They look at things like pareidolia. That's when you see patterns in random stuff, like seeing faces in clouds.
Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
Or suggestibility, where what other people say influences what you believe.
So it's not just what's actually out there, but also how our brains make sense of it.
Right. And that leads us to another important part of scientific investigation, how stories spread.
Like how rumors get started.
Exactly. They look at how rumors and legends grow, how eyewitness accounts can be changed by social pressure or what people already believe, and how media coverage can blow things out of proportion.
So they're tracing how a story goes from one person saying they saw something to a whole community believing it.
That's a great way to put it. And this kind of research is helpful not just for understanding cryptids, but for understanding how information spreads in general, and how our beliefs are shaped by our culture.
So even in the age of the internet and fact-checking, what we believe is still influenced by all these social factors.
Exactly. That's one of the things that makes this topic so intellectually stimulating. It's a constant reminder that finding the truth is complicated. And to understand the world around us, we have to consider both the objective facts and the subjective experiences.
It's a balancing act, and it feels super relevant now with all the information and misinformation flying around.
You're absolutely right. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to talk about something else about cryptids, their connection to specific landscapes, and how the environment itself might be part of these legends.
Yeah, it's like each cryptid belongs to a certain place. Places that feel mysterious or even dangerous, like Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest forests, or the Jersey Devil in those shadowy pine barrens.
Exactly. And researchers have wondered if certain environmental things could be contributing to those legends.
Like what?
The terrain, the climate, how sound travels in that place, even weird electromagnetic fields. They're asking, could these places have something inherently strange about them that makes people more likely to see cryptids?
Like the place itself is messing with people.
It's possible. For example, there's this thing called infrasound. It's sound waves that are too low for us to hear.
Okay.
But they can make people feel uneasy, anxious, even hallucinate.
Whoa, really?
And these waves can happen naturally. From wind, ocean waves, even earthquakes. Some researchers think certain places might have a lot of infrasound, and that might explain some of those weird experiences people report.
So it's like the landscape itself is playing tricks on our senses, making us more likely to see or hear things that aren't really there.
Exactly. There's also this idea of landscape memory.
Landscape memory.
The idea that places can hold on to the energy of past events, emotions, even traumas, like an imprint.
So like a place could be haunted by its history.
Some people believe that, and that those imprints can affect people today, make them feel uneasy or more aware of things.
That's spooky. So it's not just stories. The land itself could be holding on to those stories.
Right, and this connects to another idea, liminal spaces.
Liminal space.
Those in-between places,
Uh-huh.
like the edge of a forest or a cliff or a deserted road at night.
Okay, I get it. Places that feel kind of unsettling.
Yeah, they make you feel out of sorts. Some people think those places are more likely to have paranormal activity or weird experiences.
Like they're outside the normal rules.
Exactly. And this is where the study of cryptids gets mixed up with psychology, anthropology, even folklore. Researchers want to know how our perceptions of place, our culture's stories, and our own personal experiences all come together to make these mysteries.
Okay, so we've gone from those dark roads in Point Pleasant to spooky forests and landscapes that just feel off. We've met creatures that we can't really explain, heard stories that blur the lines between truth and legend, and explored theories that range from, well, possible to totally out there. But the question I keep coming back to is, what's the point of all this?
Yeah, why are we so into these cryptid stories, and what can they tell us about ourselves and the world?
I mean, is it just for fun? Or is there something deeper going on?
That is the big question, isn't it? And I don't think the answer is about proving or disproving every story.
It's about the journey.
Yeah, it's about exploring the mystery and about how these stories reflect our fears, our curiosity, the things we long for.
It's almost like cryptids are a test. Like they show us what we believe and how we deal with things we don't
I
understand.
like that, a Rorschach test for our beliefs.
Exactly. They make us think about what's possible, question what we think we know, and really grapple with the limits of our understanding.
And in a world that's so focused on data, technology, and knowing everything for sure,
Cryptids remind us that there's still mystery out there.
right, there are still things we can't easily explain, places where logic and reason don't give us all the answers.
They're like holding a space for wonder, for the things we just can't explain. Maybe even for forces in the universe that we're only starting to understand.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that sense of wonder, I think it's crucial because it keeps us curious, it sparks creativity, and it reminds us to be humble.
Humble.
Yeah, humble about how much we don't know about this vast universe we're a part of.
So don't dismiss something just because it hasn't been scientifically proven yet.
Exactly. Keep an open mind. And in that way, I think cryptids can teach us a lot about critical thinking.
Critical thinking. How so?
Whether you believe in cryptids or not, you have to think about the evidence. Look at different perspectives. Decide if the claims make sense. That's all critical thinking.
So it's like training for our brains, no matter what we're trying to figure out.
Right. It's about figuring out what's true and what's not. Recognizing bias, seeing when logic breaks down, and forming your own conclusions. And those skills, they're useful for everything, not just cryptids.
Yeah, especially now, when there's so much information out there and so much of it's wrong.
Exactly. Being able to think critically is more important than ever.
So maybe these cryptid stories, whether they're about real creatures or not, they're like practice for our brains
They give us a chance to get better at how we think.
to figure out how we form beliefs, how we interpret evidence, and how to deal with a world that's full of complicated information.
You got it. And let's not forget the stories themselves.
Right.
Cryptids, they live in stories, stories that get passed down and change a little each time they're told.
They become part of our culture.
Exactly. And those stories, even if they're not about real creatures, they can teach us about ourselves, about the power of what we believe and our need to make sense of the world.
It's like they connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
Beautifully said. And I think that's why cryptids are so fascinating.
They keep us guessing.
They make us rethink what's possible, and they remind us that we still have a lot to learn about the world.
And maybe someday, one of these cryptids will actually be discovered. We'll have proof.
Wouldn't that be something? But until then, we keep searching, the stories keep going, and we keep imagining what might be out there.
Well, thanks for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been a wild ride.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, keep that curiosity alive. What would your own cryptid be like? What would it look like? Where would it live? Let us know. Thanks for tuning in to PastCast. We hope today's episode sparked your curiosity for history. If you enjoyed it, leave us a review. It helps us reach more history lovers like you. Stay curious and join us next time on PastCast.